The music industry is in mourning as 76-year-old Ozzy Osbourne takes his final bow. After battling Parkinson's disease and other health issues for years, the Prince of Darkness died on July 22, 2025. One of his most disturbing confessions suddenly seems like a prophecy. 4 years have been torture for me. My health is awful, not merely a rock legend. This man had repeatedly peered into the abyss and kept walking. A man who defied suffering with every breath. Not only did Parkinson's weaken him, he lost leg power. A horrible fall broke his spine. He gasped through surgery and stillness. Today, as the world mourns, fate has struck its final and most brutal blow. Behind the Prince of Darkness was a warrior exhausted by war who yearned for peace. It's not just another tragedy for Ozzy Osbourne. The revelation is so harsh and heartbreaking that it will leave you shaking long after the last note. Before we begin, hit like to honor a legend who gave the world everything he had and now leaves a stillness stronger than any scream. Before loud crowds, blazing lights, and the Prince of Darkness tale entered music history, there was silence. A quiet that may shatter a youngster who never dreamed. Developed to survive. Young John Michael Osbourne, born in 1948, lived in a tight, freezing home with 6 children and 2 parents in Aston, Birmingham's soot-stained slums. Too fatigued to care. His exhausted factory worker father thought feeling was weakness. After long hours on the assembly line, his mother hardly had energy to be soft. The world will later know Ozzy as not smart or charming. He was the forgotten youngster who blended into poverty. He had nowhere to go at school. The letters mocked him. Numbers danced. Dyslexia wasn't understood in the 1950s. It was misinterpreted as foolish. Teachers called him useless, and classmates teased him cruelly. The bullying went beyond playground names. No adult ever inquired why it was fists in the hallway, knees to the stomach, and bloodied lips behind buildings. There was no escape at home. After crying at home, his father hit him with a belt, since vulnerability wasn't accepted. Ozzy subsequently remembered there was no sympathy for pain. You were punished. The hush surrounding him increased. He trained to wear it like armor. But armor doesn't heal. That stillness was terrible by 1962, when he was 14. He connected a rope with his mother's washing line, climbed a chair, and waited for the world to let go in a tiny, poorly lighted bedroom. Instead of mercy, fate raged. His father hauled him down and thrashed him again, as if violence could erase despair. Some part of him cracked or calcified that day. He stopped trying at school and speaking until compelled. Adolescence passed him by with a blank expression. Laughter became strange. The mirror revealed a fading boy. He left school at 15 without qualifications, purpose, or plan. He worked at slaughterhouses, construction sites, and factories, tuning vehicle horns. His distractions, awkwardness, and brokenness prevented it from lasting. Each employment ended in firing, forgetfulness, and solitude. Hunger plagued him at 17. Physical hunger, not figurative. He wore holey shoes and threadbare clothing. His hope was shredded, and he no longer cared. His life and lungs were running out of oxygen. Desperation didn't murmur, screamed. A failed burglary in 1965 put him in Winson Green Prison. Behind those walls, reality slammed hard. Another prisoner attacked him, intimidating him. He fought back with a metal chamber pot, his only weapon. It was survival, not bravery. Despite the gloom, a spark survived. A prison radio played the Beatles' She Loves You one afternoon, sparking something. For once, Ozzy didn't want to leave. He wanted to live loudly and be seen. He later said the moment altered him. I couldn't play, but I needed to be on stage. I had to scream louder than my pain to save him. Not success yet, but motivation. That prison youngster who begged the world to let him out made a vow. Birmingham would remember him. He was noisy. He would scare. He was unforgettable. Instead of serenity or privilege, a legend rose from sorrow where anguish produced a voice that would shock the world. The darkness of his adolescence had scarcely lifted when a sound broke the silence of despair, a calling that would shape his soul for decades. Ozzy Osbourne, 17, freed from Winson Green Prison in 1965, didn't seek forgiveness. He drifted through a universe that had determined he didn't matter. He learned nothing from his 6-week sentence for robbing a clothing store out of desperation, just proved his social worthlessness. He left that cell more broken than ever. A song, not a rescuer, performed the miracle. He felt like the world opened as he heard the Beatles' "She Loves You" crackle over a poor radio speaker. Later, he recalled hearing God speak through music. He spoke distantly, nearly crying. That event provided him a vision but didn't erase his back injuries or deep terror. Despite not knowing how, he knew he had to compose music. Not polished or faultless music, but screaming music. That screamed louder than his long-standing pain. That spoke louder than his childhood silence. That shouted louder than the darkness he almost fell into. He connected a rope with his mother's washing line, climbed a chair, and waited for the world to let go in a small, poorly lighted bedroom. And now, 2 years later, he heard a reason not to. By 1968, that shout resonated. A little newspaper post for a vocalist led him to a derelict Birmingham rehearsal facility. He met 3 other haunted men. Tony Iommi, a guitarist with missing fingertips, couldn't tone down his power. Their sound was unsettling due to bassist Geezer Butler's occult obsession. A drummer named Bill Ward performed like thunder in human skin. Earth was their first name, but a chance meeting with Black Sabbath inspired them. This became a goal. If people pay to be afraid, Ozzy said, why not give them scary and moving music? They didn't seek fame. They were striving to survive and cleanse something nasty and silent. Their music was boring. It was exorcisms. These were distorted agonies, grief, converted into guitars. On Friday, February 13th, 1970, they released their self-titled debut album. Only the dark, gloomy, almost cursed date felt fateful. Critics retreated. They termed it wicked, unlistenable, and diabolical. However, the young, shattered, and lonely listened. They felt seen. Ozzy shouted their well-being in a world where no one inquired. Paranoid, their second album, was composed quickly and accidentally that year. Yet, it became gospel. Tracks like War, Pigs, Iron Man, and the mournful title track saved lives. Classically trained Ozzy's voice wasn't. Even the tuning was off. It was real. It was raw. It was the sound of someone who had recovered and dared the world to push him again. Later, he said, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew it had to be loud. That loudness went beyond volume. It was revenge. It was a shout of, I survived and will not be quiet. He didn't need to learn music reading or take lessons, because his suffering was the melody, wounds the lyrics, past the percussion, and soul. It was the amplifier. Hidden underneath the lunatic appearance, wild actions, and theatrical antics was the Aston boy who was called stupid, worthless, and invisible. That youngster was still screaming, but suddenly the world was listening. Early Black Sabbath didn't merely pioneer a genre, they were life-reclaiming. Neither did Ozzy build heavy metal. He bled that into existence. Every concert, growl, and riff was a defiance of his fate. Even as fame stormed in, audiences roared, records sold, and headlines blared, he remained tormented. His inner voices roared louder with each applause. Success never erased pain. It merely hid it. Despite becoming a legend, he still felt like a runaway shouting into the void. But that scream altered everything. It built beyond music. It created myth. Memory was built. It created a tortured legacy, some resilience. By the mid-1970s, Ozzy Osbourne ruled heavy metal. But beneath the shouting crowd and blazing stage lights, his spirit was breaking. A generation-piercing voice was suddenly drowned out by inner evils no spotlight could penetrate. Black Sabbath pioneered a thunderous sound that resonated to outcasts worldwide, broken and furious. Ozzy found his emptiness more deafening as the music got louder. Behind closed doors, he was unraveling, plagued by harmful habits, childhood traumas that had never healed, and fame's crushing weight. The band became renowned with albums like 1970's Paranoid and 1973's Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. But Ozzy was disappearing into shadows the stage lights couldn't track. His bandmates noticed the missed rehearsals, nonsensical outbursts, and dying spark behind his crazy eyes. Former Riff's brother Tony Iommi went cold. Blame and exhaustion filled the air between them. The 1979 betrayal was the last. He was dismissed, not in person, lacking dignity. Someone else was sent. With abandonment in his voice, Ozzy recalled that they didn't have the balls to inform me. That was my band. Not merely a career was ruined, it was his refuge ripped away. Black Sabbath was more than music to Ozzy. Only there did chaos make logic and his brokenness become power. He was expelled and discarded like a warning label without it. He hid in a Los Angeles hotel room, soul drowning, drapes pulled. Later he said, "I just sat in that room. Numbing myself made me feel nothing. I believed I would vanish in the solitude." He was still Ozzy Osbourne to the outer world. He was a decaying version of himself in that room. Pulsating ghost. Screams inside the man who taught the world to scream. But legends persist. They change. Ozzy's darkest hour, something stirred in the ashes. Sabbath's former manager's daughter, Sharon Osbourne, saw more than a fallen idol. She saw an unfinished man. She rescued him from the rubble and said, "You were the band's charm. You can do this alone." Her faith struck wet stone like lightning. Randy Rhoads arrived, young, disciplined, and phenomenally talented. His guitar played, cried, flew, and screamed. Ozzy considered Randy a lifeline, not simply a bandmate. Their 1980 album Blizzard of Oz was made for survival, not joy. Songs like Crazy Train were anthems and resurrections. Defiance in every lyric and chord. Still here. I matter. Looking back, the collapse wasn't the end, the crucible. Ozzy had to be destroyed to reveal his raw, resilient fire, though his future would be filled with loss, sadness, and conflicts that would leave deeper scars than fame could heal. This was the moment his spirit roared loudest. He said I was out of control. Somehow, I persisted. Always continued. Ozzy Osbourne and Randy Rhoads shared more than music. It was spiritual, saving, nearly divine. Randy entered Ozzy's life with more than a guitar. He broke through the storm like a light. Randy showed Ozzy, still hurting from being booted out of Black Sabbath and barely holding to sanity, that beauty, discipline, and purpose could survive in a brutal and pointless world. Randy's youth was concentrated, not irresponsible. Unlike Ozzy, his creation streamed like fire through glass, shaped and precise. They built redemption in sound while making music. Defiance was the theme of 1981's Diary of a Madman, their follow-up album. Once dismissed as damaged goods, Ozzy became a powerhouse again. Randy helped make that road. Ozzy remarked, "Randy wasn't just a guitar player, he was my friend, my little brother, and the only reason I kept going." The bond went beyond songs. The heartbeat kept Ozzy alive throughout a delicate rebirth. Their stage presence was electric, raw and unrestrained Ozzy, and controlled and transcendent Randy. Humor, philosophy, late-night chats, and respect were off-stage. Randy's ability and soul impressed Ozzy. He was graceful, Ozzy remembered, like he didn't have forever, therefore he valued every note. They worked quickly, knowing that lightning doesn't strike twice and that you honor it. Storms never last. Ozzy would later admit he felt it. That eerie quiet before fate is cruel. Again. They flew too high. It didn't last and broke hard. This would shatter everything. The nightmare Ozzy never saw coming arrived with the silence of a throat scream on March 19th, 1982. The band routinely visited their bus driver's property in Leesburg, Florida, when touring. A modest private plane sat idle, tempting a restless morning. The licensed pilot driver took it for a joyride. Always curious and calm, Randy Rhoads and makeup artist Rachel Youngblood boarded. The loop in the sky was meant to be harmless, a delight before the next long drive. Ozzy watched from below, smiling faintly. May have been plagued by an unnamed shadow. The plane passed twice before the unexpected happened on the third. A wing hit the band's tour bus. When it hit, the plane twisted, plunged, and caught fire. Randy Rhoads, 25, died. Daytime comet extinguishing. Ozzy sprinted toward the crash. Cry Randy's name till his voice shattered. Flames were more than fire. They ended. Unable to fathom what was before him, he dropped beside the wreck, shivering and crying. He was distraught for hours. He couldn't speak for days. He was in a fog of disbelief for weeks. Later, he said he lost part of himself that day. Not only Randy's body burned, my hope, music, and reason to breathe. A buddy saved the man from bankruptcy, but fate plunged him back into darkness. This time, the descent felt endless. Sharon initially couldn't reach him. Canceled shows. The laughs ceased, the home quieted. It seemed if the universe had muted the melody. Randy's death emptied Ozzy. Time would force him to keep walking, but part of his spirit stayed in that blazing wreck on that merciless March morning. A little plane carrying Randy erupted in a blaze, horrifying Ozzy. A piece of Ozzy perished then. He remained silent, unable to speak or eat, and immersing himself in booze to cope with the loss for weeks. Losing Randy was like losing part of my soul, he remarked. I wanted to die. Music wasn't my thing. I wanted nothing. There was more than grief. Emotional paralysis. Sharon, previously his lifeline, struggled to reach him. I thought I'd lost him forever, she said. However, something incomprehensible emerged from that despair. Ozzy resumed writing to remember, not move on. Every song and mic scream was a dedication to his forever companion. The pain would never go away, but Ozzy knew he had to keep the music going for the fans and himself. But Randy. His survival was a defiance, and every show after held a tragic legacy. He was moving, but not healed. That meant Ozzy Osbourne was alive. You'd think surviving the unspeakable would teach his spirit to heal. But grief is illogical. Randy Rhoads' death didn't help Ozzy Osbourne recuperate. They were about his decline into a secret, merciless darkness that clawed at him day after day until even music, his last salvation, couldn't drown out the quiet. Noise and numbness ripped through the 1980s. Each tour was like a war zone, each hotel room a broken reflection of him. World watched a madman with smeared eyeliner and mythological demeanor on stage. Backstage, Ozzy was fading, volatile, unreachable, barely hanging on. His anchor, Sharon, tried everything. Once, she saved him and refused to go. Even her love couldn't always see through his fog. Ozzy would later admit, I wasn't even in my own life, with a whisper. Just gone. Alcohol consumed him by 1987. Pills muddled memory, illusion, and escape. August 1989 brought a night of collapse, not rage. An evening when Ozzy, lost in himself, did something so devastating that it shook everything he loved. In a haze he barely remembers, he nearly destroyed Sharon, his everything. Later, he admitted it wasn't him. It was like watching someone else. "I broke when I woke up and realized what happened. I wanted to die." He disappeared that night, confused and hollow-eyed, unaware of the gravity of the situation. Sharon, more in pain than anger, said, "I didn't know whether to press charges or call for help. I knew something had to change for us both." Ozzy was sent to rehab and a place to face the damage. Behind those walls, without cameras or applause, Ozzy faced the wreckage of his future self. His children no longer recognized him. Neither did the man. There were no costumes, guitars, or noise. His counselor asked, "What do you fear most?" Ozzy immediately said, "She'll leave because I've pushed her too far." But Sharon stayed. She approached him with tired but fiery eyes and said, "You are still in there." "I know. That wasn't forgiveness. That was war." Ozzy fought every day in that center for the right to keep the love he nearly lost, not for fame or redemption. The fight was brutal. He left thinner, quieter, and haunted, not healed, but finally realized how far he had fallen and how important rising was. Years later, he said, "That's when I realized I couldn't keep falling and pretending it was flying. Must choose to live." A silence so heavy it pressed down like grief followed the storm, not calm, but vacancy. Ozzy Osbourne, stripped of bravado and performance, stood at the edge of the life he'd wrecked, unsure if his former self was still there. After the night, he nearly lost himself to his darkest self, and the woman who had saved him became a victim of his unraveling. Ozzy was arrested, but not imprisoned in 1989. Psychiatric facility, not a condemnation. It was his last chance. There was no music, lights, or screaming crowds inside those walls. The only man, engulfed in guilt and shame, went silent for weeks. The heavy metal voice was a whisper in a dim recovery hallway, resonating with regret. Sharon waited outside those walls. She returned in defiance, not duty. She saw the man buried beneath the wreckage, flickering, unlike others. She subsequently remarked he had a hidden spark. I knew it was there. Ozzy fought in that sterile recovery center. No audience, no critics, but his chest beasts. The cleansing process devoured him, burning toxins and delusions. Each memory, injustice, and scar was exposed. Instead of healing, it was battle. With quivering feet and searing conviction, he battled his way ahead, conscious yet uncured. In 1990, he did the inconceivable. He returned to music with deadly clarity, not his youth's rage. No More Tears, an album about survival, was created after reuniting with Zakk Wylde. Released in 1991, it was more than a comeback, a reckoning. The songs Mama, I'm Coming Home, and Road to Nowhere were not only radio hits. These confessions were from a damaged guy striving to rebuild. It was the sound of me striving to be human again, Ozzy said, his voice faint but definite. The world heard. Fans, who worried his silence was permanent, saw him rise as a man, not a myth. Offstage, the battle continued. Each show was victory, each sober dawn a miracle. Sharon now fought with him, not for him, as a soldier. I owe her everything, Ozzy said. Each day, she saved my life. Once shivering beneath psychosis, their marriage became a tribute to flawed but unwavering persistence. Ozzy worked tirelessly in the early 1990s, afraid to quit. He toured relentlessly, created new music, and planned a 1992 farewell tour. His nature kept him coming back. Although he lived, the suffering persisted. His words murmured its haunting presence. His listeners felt the calm behind his gaze. It wasn't for show as Ozzy howled into the black on stage. Surviving created sound. It was a man screaming to live, not simply be heard. After remembering on those days, he stated, "I never believed I'd live this long. Each day is borrowed, therefore I'm trying to make it count." It was more than a comeback for those who knew his cage walls, near losses, craziness, and mercy. A resurrection. After looking into the abyss, the Prince of Darkness clawed his way back, injured and bleeding, but breathing. Although the wounds never healed, he wore them as proof. Proof. Survival is not luck. You make this choice in despair and every day after. After Ozzy Osbourne had worked his way to a fragile serenity based on broken memories and hard-won redemption, fate dealt him another cruel blow. The body finally assessing its years. The early 2000s should have been wonderful. A new generation was discovering his music. And the Osbournes, a wild, unedited glimpse at his personal life, made him a cultural icon. The Dark Prince vanished, been replaced by a bewildered but lovable father who fumbled with TV remotes and wore mismatched clothes in the kitchen. The show came out in 2002 and made Ozzy famous in homes that had never heard a Black Sabbath riff. Behind the bizarre domestic stardom was a man on a tightrope. Ozzy, now in his 50s, carried a lifetime of risk. He had stiff joints, poor reflexes, and inconsistent health. On December 8, 2003, the thread broke. A quad bike trip over his land ended tragically when he lost control and crashed into the ground. He broke his clavicle, ribs, neck vertebra, and lungs in the accident. He stopped breathing. Ozzy Osbourne was transported to the hospital and placed on a ventilator, remaining mute, immobile, and terrifyingly vulnerable for 8 days. Sharon subsequently said, "I believed I'd lose him. I prepared for goodbye." Fans worldwide held their breath. After enduring so much, was this the end? Ozzy again defied expectations. He emerged, squinting against the hospital lights, whispering words no one expected to hear again. Doctors predicted it would take months or years for him to walk, acquire strength, and breathe again. Ozzy had always done the impossible. Through excruciating suffering and rigorous treatment, he rebuilt. Small steps were victories, each breath a witness. In 2004, just months later, he walked onto the Brighty Awards stage to tremendous acclaim from supporters and a world that had seen him fall and rise. However, the accident caused scars that X-rays could not see. Chronic pain whispered, making moving difficult some days. Ozzy said he wakes up hurting yet breathing. Okay, enough. It's this quiet, weary resilience, now a low, obstinate growl, that characterized Ozzy's later years. He's not strong from loud guitars or pyrotechnics, refusing to stop, even when everything hurts, from daring to rise when staying down is simpler. He made poetry from agony and survival. As he returned to the spotlight, slower but unbowed, one thing became evident. Not all legends die out. They survive fire. Ozzy Osbourne thought he had endured all life could dish out, but 2019 came with a cruelness that surpassed even his darkest days. There were no bright lights or deafening crowds to drown out the anxiety this time, just a quiet day at home and one mistake that altered everything. One fall, seemingly trivial, was disastrous. He lost the metal rods fused into his spine during the 2003 quad bike crash in an instant. It seemed if the past had returned with ferocity, ripping open physical and mental wounds, bringing him back to an indescribable pain. Ozzy whispered in an interview barely steady that doctors delivered a second, soul-crushing blow, a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, a silent, relentless enemy that slowly, cruelly, eroded the very core of what it meant to move, stand tall, and be free. Ozzy, who had formerly ruled the stage with unstoppable fury and fire, felt like his identity was stolen. The tremors started. He lost balance. Then the unedited confession became public. "I can't walk properly. I'm wobbling. A man stripped to truth. No masks or rock star persona." His statements were honest and heartbreaking, not just a diagnosis, a reckoning. The world that witnessed him defy death now saw him face time. He claimed in his later years, exhausted and sad, that these past few years have been pain. The suffering, the anxiety, the powerlessness. It wasn't showy, it existed. Sharon stood beside him as usual. Her unflinching devotion couldn't stop the illness's slow, brutal damage to the man she loved. Ozzy fought his body and conscience throughout. He kept the reality from admirers while caring about their emotions, not his image. He didn't want to disappoint his decades-long supporters. After the truth was revealed, the world didn't react. Reached back. Supporters rallied. They witnessed amazing strength in the man who endured his anguish. Though his bones shook and his voice trembled, he created. His 2020 album Ordinary Man was tormented by grief, but yet bright with defiance. It went beyond music. My statement was engraved in pain and grit. I'm still here. I have more to say. Ozzy Osbourne fought for more than music, for meaning and the right to continue when everything shouted quit. Every step he took with canes and painful joints was a protest. Every note he sung protested. He never gave up despite surgeries, repeated hospital stints, and moments when he wasn't sure he'd stand again. "I'm not ready to hang up my mic yet," he said. Everything was in that sentence. Fire, remembrance, hope. His tale was so moving because of that. Not fame or legacy, but his repeated rise, even if his entire body told him not to. Ozzy Osbourne, aged but unaffected, reminded the world of one final reality in his dying years. True legends don't pass quietly. Echoes remain. Even when the lights have gone out, that raw, imperfect human echo still roaring. The darkness around Ozzy Osbourne at 76 was no longer from pyrotechnics or stage lights. Time was quieter, colder, and more relentless. Parkinson's condition deepened in his final years, changing every aspect of his life. The once unshakable Prince of Darkness woke to trembling hands, weak legs, and a voice that had once shattered stadiums, now a feeble echo. Each day began uncertainly. He sometimes didn't recognize himself in the mirror in the morning. Even in his weakness, he refused to submit. "I'm still battling," he added, "even if I don't recognize myself some days, am not done." His world was less about venues, more about survival. Daily therapy, carefully scheduled medications, physical support, and 24-hour care were his routine. Sharon, who had supported him through every fall and resurrection, stayed with him. Not just a partner, but his rock. Their Buckinghamshire home became a sanctuary for a man who once raged across stages, but now moved quietly. Hallways had railings, ramps replaced steps, and every corner spoke adaptability. Ozzy pursued pieces of himself within the walls. He would sit in the lawn with headphones on, listening to the riffs that constructed his universe on good days. He entered his home studio occasionally to remember the man who lived inside the music, not to record for admirers. His body weakened, but his mind stayed keen. He still cursed, joked, and startled interviewers with dark humor and deep honesty. He spoke of death fearlessly. He claimed it's the following tour sans the soundcheck. Ozzy was irreverent and belligerent even in decline, but underlying the swagger was calm acceptance. All remaining. Shows were canceled. The stage was behind him. However, in typical Osbourne manner, he refused to end on that note. Instead, he said goodbye with elegance and grit. Peaceful goodbye for a man whose life was anything but. His legacy of hardship and perseverance echoes louder than any encore. Ozzy no longer performs. He demonstrated one final truth with each breath, recollection, and murmured song in his latter years. Not all legends perish with music. They survive. Silence follows. July 5th, 2025, felt more like a final prayer for a generation than a performance. Ozzy Osbourne and the original Black Sabbath members returned to Birmingham, the birthplace of the legend. It was dubbed Back to the Beginning, but it seemed like the conclusion. Nearly 6 million people watched from around the world, but over 40,000 packed the arena. The crowd was hushed when Ozzy appeared slowly, leaning on a cane alongside Sharon. Reverence, not restraint. It went beyond performance. The farewell was wrought in bodily and mental vibrations. Old age cracked his voice, his hands shook, time blurred when the first notes rang out. All lyrics bled memory, all riffs felt like resurrection. "This is it," he said, and hearts broke. He later admitted that this may be his last stage appearance, with calmness, not sadness. The curtain didn't fall that night. It fell like dust. Thunder-carved career. Ozzy exited and rose as usual. All $190 million from the concert went to his causes: Acorn Children's Hospice, Birmingham Children's Hospital, and Cure Parkinson's. It was more than a farewell gift. It was a promise to keep shining even as he aged. In his closing weeks, Ozzy addressed his fans through calm moments of honesty rather than mayhem and fireworks. He and Sharon revealed their life on the Osbournes podcast, swapping honesty for performance. When not behind a mic, he was in the garden, with grandchildren curled at his feet, sharing tales of bats, lunacy, love, recovery, darkness, and redemption from a world that once screamed. By then, those stories weren't about chaos. They discussed survival. Before dying on July 22nd, 2025, Ozzy Osbourne taught us one last lesson, same one he lived all his life. Noise doesn't create legends. Silence confirms them. Even when they fall, their echoes soar. Ozzy Osbourne was surrounded with legacy at this peaceful point in his trip, where stadium roars had been replaced by soft garden winds and family whispers. One represented by his children who inherited his name and soul. His eldest, Amy Osbourne, born in 1983, chose to pursue her own music under the name ARO, proving that silence can be as powerful as a scream. Ozzy's tenacity was reflected in 1984-born Kelly Osbourne, graceful irreverence, outspoken but sensible. As a singer, designer, and media personality, she embraced her father's legacy while aggressively creating her own place. Jack Osbourne, Sharon's youngest child, went from reality TV to documentary filmmaking, regularly investigating the supernatural. In addition to his career, Jack accompanied his father to hospital visits, oversaw business choices, and helped him carry a burden too heavy for one man. Jessica and Louis, two unknown names, were born from Ozzy's first marriage to Thelma Riley, but within Ozzy's system. Despite their privacy, they remained close to the family. Ozzy's public appearances showed his love for his children, especially Kelly and Jack, whether at events, interviews, or rare family images that caught more than affection. A survival bridge for generations. As he progressively faded off the stage that defined him, they became his lineage, his firekeepers, and the guardians of a myth that refuses to die. The idea behind Ozzy's Twilight may have been more compelling than his music. The man who linked wealth to freedom is gone. Ozzy saw his $200 million net worth in 2025 as a compass, not an empire. In early 2024, he completed his will out of respect for the life he survived. He left Sharon and his 5 children clear trusts for his grandchildren's health and education. Will was different from other rock stars because of what was beyond the genes. A large chunk of his estate went to the causes that saved him when everything else failed. Mental health programs for musicians, drug rehabilitation, education scholarships for working-class youngsters who want to play chords and distortion, and lifelong financing for animal rescue shelters. Ozzy always appreciated dogs' calm loyalty, even in pandemonium. He said in a private message attached to the will, "They gave me back to myself, so I owe them the rest." Sharon agreed to read this note when the time came, an echo of a guy who yelled into space and now vows. In a final act of dedication, Ozzy demanded that his solo income support these causes following his death. "Music saved me. Perhaps it will save someone," he remarked. 10 words captured a lifetime. His image became more than cultural after his second Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 2024 for his solo work. It grew spiritual. His face is on murals, his riffs pulse through subway headphones, and lecturers quote and tattoo his songs. The genuine homage isn't platinum records, but the people who fought for him. Madman Ozzy Osbourne, who bit bats and defied death, is at peace. He faced the dying light instead of fighting it. I faced it with memory and defiance, not fear. Leave a comment, share a story, or say thank you if these words touched you, or if his voice shaped your youth, pain, or survival. Because Ozzy's legacy goes beyond mayhem. It shows that even broken people can brighten the world. Relax, Ozzy. May the cacophony end and the silence bring you calm. In his new place, there's no discomfort, operations, or Parkinson's. Only light, distant guitar echoes, and a timeless land where legends no longer fight. Take it easy, Ozzy. You deserve this peace after shouting through pain and caring deeply for the lost.